Chapter 8 Tāraka Brahma Yoga, the Yoga of the Supreme. Verses 1 and 2. Arjuna inquired, O Purushottama, Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the Self? What is karma? What is action? What is this material manifestation? Who are the demigods? Who is the object of sacrifice? And how does he dwell within the body? O Madhusudana, how can you be known by those who are self-controlled at the time of death? Anuvrtti. For the serious student of yoga, and for that matter anyone desiring the perfection of life, Arjuna asks Śrī Kṛṣṇa, his dearest friend and well-wisher, a series of very important questions. Vedanta Sutra, one of the most scholarly literatures ever written on the thesis of transcendence, begins with the statement, Om Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now, in this human form of life, one should inquire into Brahman. The human form of life is actually meant for inquiry into such matters, as Arjuna has put forward, and the Supreme Master of Yoga, Śrī Kṛṣṇa, will now answer them most concisely. The purpose of the human form of life is also explained in Srimad Bhagavatam as follows. Kamasya nendriya pritir labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jigyasa narto yash cheha karmabhi. Translation. Life's desire should never be aimed towards gratifying the senses. One should desire a healthy life only because human life is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's activities. Verse 3. Bhagavan Śrī Kṛṣṇa replied, It is said that Brahman is the imperishable supreme, and the Atma is the original spiritual nature of the living being. Karma is that which produces birth, duration of life, and death. Verse 4. This material manifestation is defined as constantly changing, and this material universe is the cosmic form of the Supreme Person. I am the object of all sacrifices, situated in all living beings. Verse 5. At the time of death, one who leaves the body specifically remembering me attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Verse 6. O son of Kunti, whatever state of being one remembers at the time of death, one certainly attains to that nature. Verse 7. Therefore always remember me and fight. Surrender your mind and intelligence to me, and you will surely attain me. Anuvrtti. Śrī Kṛṣṇa's answers to Arjuna are to the point, and if one accepts Krishna as the ultimate authority in yoga, as indeed he is, then one quickly attains the most valuable knowledge. To acquire perfect knowledge by speculation or by the process of trial and error simply wastes valuable time. In fact, so much time is wasted in speculation and experimentation that even after centuries, such processes have failed to deliver perfect knowledge of the meaning of life. Everyone is dying, and for the most part dying without answers to life's most basic questions. However, since time immemorial, Śrī Kṛṣṇa has had the answers, and they are presented here in Bhagavad-gītā. Krishna says that all living beings are Brahman, part and parcel of the spiritual energy of the Absolute Truth, eternal, individual, imperishable, and immutable. However, in this material world, death of the body comes to everyone. There are no exceptions. But for those whose mind and intelligence are fixed on Krishna, they do not take birth again in the material world, but attain Krishna's own divine nature. Krishna is by nature Satchidananda, eternal, complete in knowledge and full of bliss. Remembering Krishna at the time of death, one attains that nature and is immediately transferred to the abode of Krishna, far beyond the material sky and the planets of birth and death. As Krishna will explain in chapter 15, one who attains his supreme abode does not return to this material world. When we speak of samsara, we are indeed talking about reincarnation. Although reincarnation is becoming a popular belief in many communities, it is for the most part misunderstood. To many, Reincarnation means being born as a human being, life after life. But this is not a fact. The human form of life is only rarely achieved. It is not something that comes in rapid succession. Above and below the human species, there are hundreds and thousands of other life forms. According to one's activities performed in this life, and one's final consciousness and state of mind at the time of death, one's next birth is determined. In the species below the human being, namely animal, aquatic, insect, and plant life, there is great ignorance and suffering. Above the human plane there are higher planets full of celestial beings and celestial pleasures. Yet higher or lower, all stations of life in the material world are temporary. There is no place of eternal damnation and no place of eternal happiness in the material universe. Nothing in this world is everlasting. Only the abode of Krsna is beyond the dualities of pleasure and suffering. Krishna says above in verse 5, Antakale chamameva smaram muktva kalevaram. One who remembers him at the time of death attains his transcendental nature. To remember Krishna at the end of life is indeed perfection, and to forget him is the greatest aberration. The Vishnu Dharmotara Purana states, Sahanistan mahachidram samoha sa cha vibrama yan muhurtam kshanam vapi vasudevo nachintayat. Translation: If even for a moment remembrance of Krishna is missed, that is the greatest loss, the greatest illusion, and the greatest anomaly. However, it is our experience of the world that death is often accompanied by great pain, confusion, and bewilderment of memory. Therefore, it would seem that to remember Krishna at the time of death is no easy task. Death may come swiftly at any time, without a moment's notice or even during sleep, thus impeding one's remembrance of Krishna. In this regard, Kulashekar Alvar writes in Mukundamala Stotram as follows. Krishna tvadiya padapankaja panjarantam adyaiva meva shitumana saraja hamsa prana prayana samaye kapavata pitai kantavarodhana vido smaranam kutastai. Translation: O Krishna, please help me die quickly, so the swan of my mind may become encircled by the stem of your lotus feet. Otherwise, at the time of my final breath, when my throat is choked up, how will it be possible for me to think of you? For the bhakti-yogī, Krishna takes all his many endeavors, practices, and services into consideration. Even if the bhakti-yogī is unable to remember Krishna at the time of death, Krishna will certainly remember him. Śrī Kṛṣṇa is never forgetful under any circumstance, and thus he swiftly delivers his devotee from the clutches of death. Krishna himself confirms this in the Varaha Purana as follows. Yadi vitadidoshena madbhakto mam chanasmaret aham smarami madbhakta nayami paramam gatim. Translation: If my devotee is unable to remember me at the time of death because of the great disturbances felt within the body, at that time I shall remember my devotee and take him to the spiritual world. Verse 8. O Partha, one who practices yoga and focuses his mind without straying from the path and meditates upon the divine Supreme Person certainly achieves him. Verse 9. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person who is all-knowing, without beginning, the Supreme Controller, who is smaller than the atomic particle, yet who is the support of all things in the universe, whose form is inconceivable, who is radiant like the sun, and who is beyond material nature. Verse 10. At the time of death, one who remembers him with a steady mind, by drawing the life airs between the eyebrows by dint of yogic power, certainly reaches the divine Supreme Person. Anuvrtti. Yoga and meditation are described herein. However, they are not impersonal or self-centered processes. Meditation is to be performed on the absolute truth, Śrī Kṛṣṇa, not on abstract ideas that we ourselves are the sum total of reality, that we are all-knowing, or that we are the supreme controller, etc. Such processes are not meditation, but self-deception, and never lead to liberation or eternal bliss. In verse 10, Śrī Kṛṣṇa says that in yogic meditations, Ashtanga and Kundalini Yoga, one should draw one's life airs to the area of the eyebrows. This indicates the location of the Agya Chakra. There are 7 chakras located in the body that are the primary seats of human consciousness. Consciousness pervades the entire body, but it is said to be centered in one of the 7 chakras. Muladhara Chakra, located at the base of the genital. Svadhisthana Chakra, located at the base of the spinal cord. Manipur Chakra, located in the navel area. Anahata Chakra, located in the heart. Vishuddha Chakra, located in the throat. Agya Chakra, located in between the eyebrows. And the Sahasrara Chakra, located at the top of the head. When consciousness is situated in the lower 3 chakras, one is found to be preoccupied with the animal tendencies of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. When consciousness is situated in the upper chakras, there is progress in the finer sentiments of spiritual culture, and ultimately liberation. Consciousness is raised in meditation from one chakra to another through the subtle passage in the body known as the Sushumna Nadi. Krishna says that the yogi should bring his consciousness to be seated in the Agya Chakra, sometimes known as the third eye. Here, the yogi makes his or her final preparation and at last raises the consciousness through the Sushumna Nadi to the Sahasra Chakra, and from there the yogi quits the material body. If the Ashtanga yogi or Kundalini yogi makes Śrī Kṛṣṇa the object of his meditation while concentrating on the Agya Chakra, then after passing the Sahasrara Chakra, the yogi achieves Krishna's supreme abode. However, if the said yogi does not make Śrī Kṛṣṇa the object of his meditation, then he may enter the Brahmajyoti for some time, but eventually he returns to this material world. The aforementioned processes of yoga take superhuman endeavor, and for the most part are not possible for the average person to achieve in this age. Ashtanga Yoga and Kundalini Yoga must be practiced in absolute seclusion from society, observing complete celibacy, and fasting for long periods. In ancient times, such yogis went to the mountain caves of the Himalayas or to the deserts. Today's yogis in modern yoga studios and societies are unable to raise their consciousness through the chakras to the Sahasrara Chakra because they lack the solitude and severe determination required. Therefore, Bhagavad-gītā conclusively recommends the process of bhakti-yoga that can be practiced by everyone, everywhere, by fixing the mind on Śrī Kṛṣṇa and thus attaining perfection. One may question that since Śrī Kṛṣṇa is speaking here in the third person, that he is not referring to himself as the object of meditation, and therefore it does not mean that we should meditate on Krishna. However, according to Swami B.G Narasingha, a great acharya of bhakti yoga, when Krishna speaks in the third person, he is referring to the object of meditation as his expansion as Paramatma, superconsciousness. As already explained in the second chapter, Śrī Kṛṣṇa manifests himself as the Paramatma, present in the hearts of all living beings. Therefore, meditation on the Paramatma means meditation on Krishna. Those who cannot comprehend the absolute truth as personal due to anarthas, misgivings of the heart, can meditate on Krishna's impersonal aspect as Brahman. But this process is tedious, and the results are limited since even the Brahman-realized yogi must once again return to the world of birth and death. Verse 11. Great sages in the renounced order of life and scholars of the Vedas accept the vow of celibacy and utter Om to enter into Brahman. I shall now explain this process to you. Verse 12. One should control all the senses and concentrate the mind within the heart, fixing the life airs between the eyebrows and fully absorbing oneself in yoga. Verse 13. Thus, by chanting the great monosyllable, Om, and remembering me, when one leaves the material body, he will attain the supreme abode. Verse 14. O Partha, that yogi who is without deviation and constantly remembers me alone easily attains me, for he is always connected to me. Verse 15. Those great personalities who have attained me never take birth again in this temporary world of misery, for they have reached the highest destination. Anuvrtti. Modern systems of yoga focus more or less on achieving a healthy condition for the body, but this is actually not the aim of yoga. The process of yoga is intended for one goal and one goal alone, to transcend the world of birth and death. There is, of course, more than one system of yoga, but all schools of yoga aim at a singular goal, liberation. As already explained in previous commentaries, the mantra Om elevates one to the stage of liberation. However, it should be noted here that the divisions of yoga, such as sense control and celibacy, must also be in place before the chanting of mantras can be effective. Mantras purify the mind and heart of material contamination, which arises from sense enjoyment. If one endeavors for purification, but at the same time does not control the senses, then it is tantamount to starting a fire while simultaneously pouring water on it. Sense control is therefore essential for those attempting to practice all forms of yoga. Verse 16. O Arjuna, all planets up to the abode of Brahma are places of birth and rebirth, but those who reach me never take birth again. Verse 17. A day of Brahma consists of 1,000 yugas, and his night also lasts for the same period. Verse 18. At the beginning of Brahma's day, all things become manifest from the unmanifest state. When Brahma's night begins again, they all become unmanifest. Verse 19. O Partha, all living beings repeatedly take birth again and again. When Brahma's night approaches, they are absorbed into me once more, and with the arrival of Brahma's day, they are born again. Verse 20. However, beyond this state is another unmanifest state that is eternal and cannot be destroyed when all other beings are annihilated. Verse 21. It is said to be unmanifest and eternal, and is declared to be the ultimate destination, upon attaining which one never returns. This is my supreme abode. Verse 22. O Partha, that supreme person within whom all living beings are situated, and who pervades the entire creation, can only be attained by bhakti-yoga. Anuvrtti. The topmost planet in the material universe is known as Satyaloka, the abode of Brahma. Life on that planet is very long. One day in Satyaloka is equal to 4,260,000,000 years on planet Earth. Nonetheless, death occurs there also. Nowhere in the material universe is free from death. At the end of each of Brahma's days, there is a partial annihilation in the universe, and a total annihilation of the universe at the end of Brahma's life. The partial annihilations are called pralaya, and the final annihilation is called mahapralaya. Everything in the universe has a beginning and an end. All things come into being, and eventually all things are destroyed. Creation, duration, and annihilation are the three basic phases of the universe. Yet Bhagavad-gītā does not subscribe to an apocalyptic worldview or an end-time scenario in which we will all be judged. The predominating deities of creation, duration, and annihilation are the three Gunavatars, Brahma, Mahavishnu, and Shiva, respectively. Brahma manifests the secondary creation, Mahavishnu maintains the creation, and Shiva, by producing a sound vibration from his Damaru drum, brings about the annihilation. These Gunavatars are portions of the plenary expansions of Krishna, the Avatari, or origin of all avatars. During the periods of annihilation, both partial and complete, the living beings rest in a state of slumber within the body of Mahavishnu, and are again manifest at the arrival of Brahma's day. This is repeated over and over again on a cosmic timescale until Brahma reaches the end of his life, at which point the entire universe is again wound up in the body of Mahavishnu. Everything necessary for the manifestation of the material universe, and indeed billions and trillions of universes, is provided by Mahavishnu in the form of the Mahatattva, the aggregate of material elements. And at the time of annihilation, that energy is again absorbed into Mahavishnu. Energy is neither created or destroyed, as it exists always as Krishna's apara prakriti, inferior material energy. That energy is endlessly mutable, manifest and unmanifest, but ultimately it is never destroyed. Krishna and all his energies are eternal. Once again, the same point is being reiterated by Krishna, that his supreme abode is beyond material nature, eternally manifest, beyond birth and death, and once going there, one does not return to samsara. That supreme abode of Krishna is Goloka Vrindavan, and it is attainable only through the process of bhakti-yoga. This supreme abode is mentioned in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita as follows. Goloka namo parisarvasimagho vaikuntato desha vishesha shekara sachatad vrajalokanam shrimat premanuvartina krishne shuddhatarenaiva bhavenaikena labhyate. Translation. Far from this material universe is the beautiful abode of Śrī Kṛṣṇa that is known as Goloka Vrindavan, the topmost Vaikunta planet. Goloka is only attained through bhakti-yoga by those who follow in the footsteps of the people of Vraja, who have pure love for Krishna. Verse 23. O best of the descendants of Bharat, I shall now explain to you those times that the yogis attain either liberation or rebirth at the moment of their departure. Verse 24. Those who know Brahman pass from this world on the path of fire and light during the time of the waxing moon or during the 6 months when the sun traverses the northern hemisphere. Verse 25. Departing on the path of darkness during the night, during the waning moon, or during the 6 months when the sun makes its course across the southern hemisphere, that yogi attains the celestial lunar planet, but then returns. Verse 26. Both these paths of light and darkness are accepted as being permanent in this world. By one path one does not return, by the other path one returns. Verse 27. The yogi who knows these two paths is never bewildered. Therefore, O Arjuna, at all times be fixed in yoga. Verse 28. Knowing this, a yogi surpasses all kinds of pious results that are achieved through study of the Vedas, by offering oblations and sacrifice, by penances, and by philanthropy. That yogi reaches the eternal abode. Anuvrtti. To attain higher planets within the material universe, one must study the Vedas, offer sacrifice, perform penances, and acts of charity. One who has performed these activities is reborn on a higher planet and lives a long life, enjoying great luxury for tens of thousands of years. However, the bhakti yogi has no desire to enjoy in higher planets. He easily achieves all the benefits of sacrifice, penance, etc., simply by surrendering to Śrī Kṛṣṇa. The bhakti yogi does not have to choose an auspicious moment to leave the material body, because he is under the shelter of Krishna. Everything is auspiciously ordained for those who have surrendered to Krishna, enabling them to reach Krishna's eternal abode. But the yogi who is not in bhakti yoga does not achieve the supreme abode of Krishna, nor does he easily ascend to the higher planets at the time of death. Factually speaking, the yogi has to choose the time of his death so as to pass from the body at the most opportune time. He must choose wisely, otherwise he is born again on this earth. Needless to say, this is a near impossibility, especially for ordinary people. Therefore, it is the yogi in bhakti yoga that is most assured of success. Om Tat Sat. Thus ends Chapter 8, entitled Tāraka Brahma Yoga, from the conversation between Śrī Kṛṣṇa and Arjuna in the Upanishad known as Srimad Bhagavad-gītā, the Yoga Shastra of divine knowledge, from the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata, the literature revealed by Vyas in 100,000 verses.